I'm Jacob Hornberger, Libertarian Party candidate for president. Both Republicans and Democrats have converted the federal government into a veritable killing machine that consists of invasions, occupations, state-sponsored assassinations, coups, alliances with dictatorial regimes, and the like. One of the recent examples of the invasion phenomenon and long-term occupation has been the invasions of Afghanistan and Iraq, which wreaked untold death and destruction in both countries. But this is not a new phenomenon. It goes back all the way to when I was in my late teens and early 20s during the Vietnam War, where they sacrificed more than 58,000 of my generation for nothing, not to mention the fact of killing millions of Vietnamese people with an undeclared war. As you all know, the Constitution requires the president secure a congressional declaration of war before he wages war. Otherwise, that war is illegal, which, of course, the Vietnam War was. And the justification for the Vietnam War was, the Reds are coming to get us. The commies are coming. The Russians are coming. It was a ludicrous justification. It was part of a racket that was just enriching what President Eisenhower called the military-industrial complex, lining their pockets with largesse and letting all those ever-increasing defense contractors feed at the public trough. The budgetary problem has gotten so large that today it's close to $1 trillion for these people, for this part of the killing machine. A major factor in the national bankruptcy that's confronting our country in the form of out-of-control federal spending and debt and monetary debauchery, the destruction of our monetary system. After they lost their old Cold War enemy, the Soviet Union, they began intervening in the Middle East. That was what the Persian Gulf War was about, against their old former partner and ally, Saddam Hussein, who now they said would become a new dictator. They end up destroying the water and sewage treatment plants in Iraq. Then they impose a brutal set of sanctions for 11 years that prevent those plants from being restored, contributing to the deaths of hundreds of thousands of Iraqi children. Yes, children. Recall Madeleine Albright, the U.S. ambassador to the United Nations' infamous statement that the deaths of 500,000 Iraqi children from the sanctions were worth it. And by it, she meant regime change in Iraq. And everybody kept telling them, not everybody, but a lot of people kept telling them, this is going to result in terrorist blowback. And it did. 1993, there was the attack on the World Trade Center, the attack on CIA agents outside CIA headquarters, the attack on the USS Cole, the attacks on the U.S. embassies in East Africa, and then finally the 9/11 attacks. And, of course, they said, oh, no, it doesn't have anything to do with our deadly and destructive interventionism. It's because the terrorists hate us for our freedom and values. Just another one of the many lies they tell as part of this interventionist foreign policy. Today, they've got the best of all worlds from their perspective. They've got their never-ending war on terrorism, which has completed the destruction of our rights and liberties, including with such inane things like the Patriot Act. And they've also ginned up the whole Cold War crisis again. That was what keeping this Cold War dinosaur NATO in existence was all about, to start absorbing Warsaw Pact countries, when it should have gone out of business, just the same way the Warsaw Pact did. But instead, they keep moving closer and closer to Russia's border, knowing full well that at some point Russia was going to strike back, which they did with the invasion of Ukraine. And now they're using that as another crisis to gin up their ever-increasing budgets and feeding at the public trough. Not to mention the fact that they are getting us perilously close to life-ending, earth-destroying nuclear war, the same way they did back in 1963 during the Cuban Missile Crisis. This is no way to live. Our heritage as Americans is a foreign policy of non-interventionism. That was reflected in the famous speech by John Quincy Adams called In Search of Monsters to Destroy that he delivered before Congress on the 4th of July, 1821. He said, we don't send our forces here in this country abroad in search of monsters to destroy like dictators and civil wars and revolutions. We instead keep our forces here at home in order to defend our own country in the event of an invasion. We need to bring all troops home from everywhere Bring them home and discharge them. They're not necessary. We need to abandon all foreign military bases, including the one at Guantanamo, which is just an imperialist base that the U.S. should never have acquired. Those lands belong to Cuba and other foreign nations. They don't belong to the United States. If we're able to restore America's heritage of non-interventionism, we will go a long way to restoring a society based on peace, prosperity, liberty, and harmony with the people of the world. I'm Jacob Hornberger, Libertarian Party candidate for president.